So let me tell you how one of my runs went downhill. I lost my left arm to an ogre previously, I believe, and I went to this weird meat pit. Then I decided to jump down a deep dark hole and I busted my feet open and I could never walk again. That's right, I only have my right arm, and in this game, you're forced to crawl if you don't have legs. I went into some mines and then some weirdo magic man or whatever used a spell on me and blew up or liquidized my right arm, leaving me as a man with just a head and a torso. Then I stopped breathing and died. Yeah, this game's a bit special if you couldn't tell. I learned about this game's existence from Super Eyepatch Wolf's video about it, and like 4 days afterwards, I bought it to see what was up with it, and man, what a ride. Though it could easily be described as difficult and cruel because of the challenge and the amount of punishment you face within the game, as saves are highly rare and most things you do generally end with you dying or losing limbs, that isn't exactly why it's so hard. Again, I'm not doubting the fact that this game pulls no punches and will make you suffer, but what I am saying is that it's hard for highly specific reasons. Subscribe and like the video if you like it, since in the future I'll be making more like it. And in today's analyzing difficulty, I'll be explaining why Fear and Hunger is a uniquely hard game and delving into if the challenge it provides is a worthwhile one or a complete waste of time. What is difficulty? You know generally what difficulty means, but it goes deeper than something simply being hard. Difficulty as a thing is highly opinionated and diverse when it comes to video games, but there are 3 main kinds of difficulty that a game can provide. They can be challenging like Terraria, as you need to have good reaction time and quick thinking when fighting a boss. Punishing, like Don't Starve Together, since you lose everything on death and must restart, or you must learn the game through experimentation like Oxygen Not Included, as with more info you can expand your colony with ease. A combination that is common with video games is the learning and challenging aspect, like Terraria again, or Risk of Rain 2. But what Fear and Hunger instead goes for is a punishing and heavy knowledge x challenge based kind of difficulty, as the challenge you face is on a surface level. The game can be incredibly easy if you already know how to deal with common enemies and if you already know how to use most items, and the only challenge to it is finding out how to do those things. Afterwards, all that's left is the punishment, which is the biggest draw of the game, since this is the most heavy aspect of difficulty this game taps into. All these aspects of difficulty combined creates a concoction of the most evil and coolest video game that I've ever played, even on the easiest difficulty, which is why I wanted the first video in the Analyze Difficulty series to be about this one. Challenge. The only challenge present in the game is figuring out information, as knowledge is key in this game. Without learning, you're most definitely screwed, since no other aspect of the game is really that challenging after a little while of playing and a few hours of analyzing your enemies. So I'll talk about it not as a general game thing, but as a starting one. And the only truly challenging thing in this game at the start are the fights. Fights are mostly a knowledge and punishment thing, and not really a challenging one. But in the start, you don't know this. Unlike regular RPGs or just regular games, you have the choice to either attack their right and left arms or legs, their torso, or their head. Most enemies have a one-shot move, which your survival of it is determined via coin toss. The only challenge that comes for them is you getting a heavy punishment, like getting an infection, losing a limb, or being killed and then learning what to do afterwards. Then fights become more of a controlled and planned out thing instead of a hard thing that'll leave you and your team in shambles. As with everything in the game, if you know what you're doing, it's not a challenge. No leveling. One thing that I forgot to talk about initially when writing the script is the fact that leveling does not exist in this game. Your character will be exactly as strong as they were at the start as in the end, meaning that there's no grinding for enemies to get stronger like any usual RPG game. Sort of small, but I just wanted to mention it before we get into the meat. Knowledge. Here's the biggest and main kind of difficulty this game offers, the need to learn. Literally everything in this game requires trial and error. It's incredibly satisfying when you find a new way to get a party member, or a way to get even deeper into the dungeon of Fear and Hunger. And this satisfying feeling you get from learning things is executed amazingly, as the game tells you completely nothing. You have to learn everything. And when I mean everything, I seriously do mean everything. Only occasionally get small hints from things like books or Sir Seymour, I guess. I would say that this aspect of difficulty in the game nearly exceeds its punishing nature, but that'd be going too far, as this game is truly one of the meanest I've ever played. Encounters. Encounters are just a learning game. Just about every enemy can be beaten easily once you know where to target and what limb does what. Enemies like the prison guard, or like these were Cultist Lantern guys, will totally body you, unless you know how to deal with them. And even then, you'll most likely take a little damage. A lot of the time it's straight up just better to run, especially if you're a mercenary with a dash skill. With that, nobody's catching you, and you can get the girl in Moonless super easily if you know what you're doing. Enemy encounters also rely on a bit of luck, as sometimes knowing what your enemy can do and where to target them isn't enough to beat them. For example, the prison guard's stinger thrust is totally random and it does like 40 damage, which is absurd, and this is an entirely unpredictable attack. So naturally you may want to cut off the stinger first, but he still has a sword which will cut off one of your arms and always goes first, so it's better to attack that initially. Truly knowing how enemies works helps a lot in fights, and understanding that there will be unpredictable elements help a lot with your decision making, since again, it's probably better just to run than lose 3/4 of your health to a prison guard because you missed a few times, or an arm. Decisions and items. A very key part of Fear and Hunger is your decision making skills. Most items have multiple very useful options for how you could use them. Let's take Explosive Vials as a quick example. With it, you can blow up small areas and get to secret rooms or more loot. Or you could use it on an enemy and do massive damage to every part of them. And whether or not one decision is better than the other depends on your situation. At times it was a good idea for me to use Explosive Vials so I could get to areas I've never seen before, but other times an enemy was too powerful for me and I had to blow them up. Or what about the Red Vial? It can melt locks and help you get into areas, or it could blind enemies. Again, depending on your situation, both are very useful, as one could help you get the girl or Kahara, or it could be a perfect debuff that you need for beating a powerful enemy. Both of these fall under the category of knowledge, because to use these kind of items effectively, you need to know what they do and how to use them in all situations before making a rational, optimal, and smart decision. Resource management. Another thing that falls under decision making is resource management. Fear and Hunger has 3 stat bars. Obviously health, which is called body in this game, but also mind and hunger, which both drain slowly and both require different things to bring back. With mind, they'll break down and eventually stop walking with you. At about 30 hunger, you get a debuff that makes your character weaker. Would it be optimal to deal with that right now, before your character can get that debuff? Or should you deal with it so that you can maximize the usage of that item? Same thing with regular healing items. Because enemies are so ruthless and they do so much damage, using great healing items could be a good decision when you have like 75 HP, since an enemy could easily do that much if you miss a few turns, which would end your run. Of course, some characters make this easier, like Moonless, who can eat rotten meat, or Enki's necromancy summons, which don't need food or mind, but these are the most constant and prominent challenges you'll face in Fear and Hunger when you're not messing about with the monsters. Party members. Party members are integral to survival, and knowing how to get them makes the game easier, combat wise. They'll be good at soaking in hits, giving or using items and skills, or just doing plain damage. But this puts more stress on your supply of food and, well, drugs. With 2, it's twice the stuff you need, 3 thrice, 4, you get the picture. So although they help you fight a ton, it also increases the stress of your food and drug supply. Knowledge conclusion. Fear and Hunger is a very trial and error based game, and without knowing anything, you're guaranteed to fail every single time entering the dungeon. There's a lot to learn about this game, and finding new strategies, items, or enemies, and learning how to use them or beat them is easily the most fun part of the game. Punishment. Here's the most memorable kind of difficulty that this game provides. It's punishing nature, and the main thing that I want to talk about this entire time. If I hadn't made it clear, this game is easily one of the most evil games ever on the standard difficulty. I can't even begin to imagine what terror and starvation or hard mode is like, but once I beat the initial game, I might make a follow-up video about these modes and if they're good challenges as well or not. Onto how this game is the most cruel that I've ever played. Luck. I genuinely hate luck mechanics in video games. Luck when used poorly takes away from the game by ignoring player skill and replacing it with an unpredictable maybe. Lots of the time, it's used to extend the game so you don't get the best drops from enemies immediately, or it's used so that fighting certain somethings is difficult. But in Fear and Hunger is probably the most unfair kind. As I said earlier, a good few enemies like hounds, cultists, and prison guards can flat out one-shot you if you fail a coin toss. Yes, a coin toss, an exact 50-50, determines your fate. I would usually hate this, but this unfairness and bullshit coin toss crap adds a lot to the game's horror, atmosphere, and even emotional impact. The fact that a completely unpredictable element is what determines your fate in a fight is interesting, and it further showcases how little control you actually have of a fight by making you choose heads or tails. If this mechanic during fights didn't exist and it was a simple 50-50 chance if the one-shot attack would miss or not, then I think that wouldn't feel like anything except bull when it hits. But because you have to choose with an option that doesn't really matter as a zero indicator as to if you get heads or tails, the loss of that sinks in further and it feels worse that you lost that fight because of that bull 50-50 chance, and you'll want vengeance, making you want to play the game again. Plus you gain information of which limb could do that attack. If you win though, it feels good because you just barely escaped death. This mechanic, while evil, is actually well implemented and one of my favorites, exactly because of how cruel and evil it is. You could also miss in fights which are just annoying and can straight up ruin runs. It's an unfair RPG maker game, it's not too surprising that you could miss. Other luck required things are how your castle randomly generates and what items you get from crates. Sometimes you get really good stuff, while other times you just get crap. And the coin toss mechanic comes back for bigger chests, some bookcases, and armor or weapon stands. Yet another infamous element of this game is how difficult it is to save. You have to get lucky and get a Book of Enlightenment, which saves your game only one time, or you could rest in a bed. Resting for the first time will save your game for free, but every other time afterwards you have to flip a coin, and if you fail this coin flip, you will have to fight a powerful enemy. It usually will summon a run-ending enemy like the Chrome Mauler or an elite guardsman. If you lose this fight, then you just die without save, and even if you beat the enemy, you don't get a save, so you have to try your luck again. This absurd luck that you need to save in the game adds a lot to the punishment factor, especially since the game can be so long. There are a lot of things you can do in this game and a lot of areas to explore, meaning that just one save screw up or death could cost you half an 1 hour to an hour of progress depending on how much you know about the game. Luck is a massive factor in the game, and it keeps it from being predictable in many ways, as no interaction has an absolutely safe outcome. All the items in chests and crates are randomized, meaning food or drugs aren't guaranteed, and even weapons or armor are guaranteed anywhere in the game. Luck is used well in this game, when in any other it just detracts majorly from my enjoyment. Debuffs. Debuffs are one of the roughest mechanics in the entire game. Your character can be debuffed in a myriad of ways, some more solvable than others. Sometimes a character could be cut or hit with some sort of claw attack and start bleeding, while other times they could straight up have a limb hacked off or broken by a single enemy. And a lot of these kind of debuffs, like losing a limb or breaking a bone, are permanent with horrible effects. If you lose your left arm, you can't hold shields or use two-handed weapons, and if you lose your right, you can't use any weapons, period. Losing both arms is easy if you don't know what you're doing too, like if you attack a prison guard in the wrong order, or if you miss an enemy and they hit you with a sword or whatever. Losing both your legs, by the way, forces you to crawl, as I said earlier in the video. Kinda sucks, and if you are dashing, it cancels out if you lose one leg. Other things like infections can only be cured by eating a green herb or cutting off the infected limb with a bone saw. If you don't, then you will die very shortly after getting the infection. This game does not tell you what these debuffs do, and you'll have to look them up or find a book that tells you. For example, if you break a bone, your maximum HP decreases to 80%. Nowhere in the game that I could find tells you that information. You just have to notice it and find out yourself, or look it up like I did, and the debuff lasts forever. There are also debuffs for whenever you get super hungry, which makes you weaker if you don't eat for too long. And with how hard it is to find food at times, this alone can be an absolute run ender. Is the difficulty good? This game's cruel form of difficulty is certainly not for everyone, as a lot of runs end with you immediately dying or losing a limb to a prison guard because you missed your first attack, or you dying because you couldn't escape a powerful enemy. But I would say that this form of difficulty that this game provides is indeed enjoyable and good. It's incredibly tedious, sometimes annoying, and even heartbreaking at times when you get far just to realize that you didn't save once. But that's what's so great about the difficulty. The game doesn't care about you, and it will torture you, and because of that, it's a unique experience that everyone should go through. As this form of pain that I went through in just 7 hours of playing this game was the most enjoyable and unique kind ever. Conclusion. That was my difficulty analysis of Fear and Hunger. I didn't want to talk about the lore or get too deep into mechanics of this, since it's just a simple analysis of why this game is hard and if that difficulty is warranted or fun to go through. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe, since I will be making more in this style, and some of my videos can be higher quality like this one. I'll be taking more time in editing and branching out more. Hope you enjoy this stuff, and I'll see you in my next video.